bonsoir, and thank you for coming. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this wonderful event and, of course, to this wonderful city. Before I take you to Bengal, where my country is located, the larger geocultural region of Bengal, I just want to talk a few sentences about the weather, the complex weather system, the climate, and of course the water that defines everything that we do and everything that sort of affects our life and living. So this is where we are, the so-called Indian subcontinent, which is also known as South Asia, and we are here. That's largely Bangladesh. And this is the Indian land and Pakistan, and beyond that, Afghanistan. But just above our country is this huge mountain range, which is the largest and the tallest mountain range in the world, which is called the Himalayas. And below us is in the Indian Ocean, moving on as the Bay of Bengal. So I say between the rock and the water, we are sort of located. And all of this water drains through mighty rivers like the Ganges into what is really the largest delta in the world. And also the water from the plateau of Tibet, the glacial melts from Tibet, also comes down like this and comes down through Bangladesh. So a lot of water, really. Again, you can see the various tributaries that drain through this country. So Bangladesh is a country of 700 rivers. It's about 150,000 square kilometers. But as you can see, it's like the veins and arteries of a human body. And we have been fortunate to have been able to work throughout this topography. And our works, as you can see, are dispersed all over. This was, of course, by intention. We are in our 30th year of practice, and it was by design from the very beginning that we sort of work in the various contexts of water and land, and of course the economical constraints that we face. The first project, today I'm going to talk about a little bit about our projects which respond to climate change. And the first one is a project we started in 2005 with the NGO Friendship. This is a client with whom I've worked a lot. We are still working. It's not a client anymore. We are almost like partners. And the founder of Friendship, Runa Khan, I think she brings a lot of energy and positive energy to the discussions and to the projects that we do. And that's why I like the way we collaborate on these projects. This project is in the middle of the river, which I talked about, comes down from Tibet, or the glacial melts of Tibet, and comes down into Bangladesh. This is a photo taken by me, and looking at it, you might think, is it the water in the land or land in the water? This is during what is known as a rainy season, and you can see that it's everywhere. So the water that comes down from the Himalayas hits this very flat land of the delta and begins to slow down. And as it slows down, it starts to deposit this silt, this alluvial soil all along. These photographs are by Hélène Binet, the French-Swiss photographer. And you can see how these are now forming, these sandbanks in the middle of the river. And people come to live here, and they continue to live even during floods. The reason for that is because they have nowhere else to go. So our project really was to look into the fate of these people, the life and living of these people within the 10-kilometer width of the river. Now, this is the river in the dry season, but when it's all wet, all this gets covered. So it's like a really wide waterway in which the flood comes in, and sometimes the flood even comes into these adjoining areas, and it's really like a sea of water. But the people, as I said, they continue to live there. And initially, our idea, we were looking into the idea of lifting these houses, but we saw no example of a house on stilts in these waters. It's because we have this kind of examples in our country, but in the mountain areas where the water can pass underneath. But here, what is the problem is the soil is very soft. There is no rock for 1,200 feet or 300 meters. So which means the soft soil gets moved when the draft comes, when the strong current comes. And if we were to sort of hold this, then we would need really deep foundations, which of course beats the purpose, and one cannot afford it. And of course, then comes the question of what happens to the cattle. Now, I know this is a little bit of a funny sketch, but the cattle, a cow or a goat, is really everything a villager has. Because they're so poor, it's just the animal that they have. And it's important to save them. So instead of trying to raise individual houses, our project was to raise the entire village above the level of highest recorded flood. And we realized that they tried this before, something like this. They tried it before, but this is what happens. When the current comes, it knows no rules, and it breaks away everything in its path. So we used to go to these sites in a seaplane because there's just water. The only place to land is on the water. And from the seaplane, I could look at these forms of, let's say, comet-shaped forms as the water comes in, and then they leave a kind of a tail. And this, we thought, is what we needed to do, kind of an entry point and an exit point. And this is what we designed. So it's an island which is on a simple dig and mound with a pond in the middle. We dig and create this mound, which is like a teardrop. And then when we place the houses, also we try to not force a kind of a master plan, but really try to follow the way the villagers make the houses around courtyards. And these courtyards are interconnected, meaning people walk from one courtyard to the other. And we try to do this, and also we worked with the villagers to give them freedom. And many times they came up with interesting solutions as well. And so, again, to repeat, to take them above the level of the flood, we have this embankment or this raised kind of a village, and in the middle we have this pond, and all the houses can then be brought on to this raised settlement. Of course, we worked with very basic things. Back in 2005, 2006, we didn't have much GPS or even mobile phone signal in the very remote areas where we worked. And so we devised very simple ways of laying out these islands. Now, the program is also interesting because the villagers themselves, they make this island, they move their own houses, and they're paid to do it. So it's like an income generation as well as food for work. This, for example, is the inner line, and that's the outer line. And as you can see, it's a very flat kind of a landscape, and this is in the middle of the river. One of our architects. So again, the villagers are cutting the pond here. This, for example, is a way they keep measure of the amount of earth they cut in a day because they're paid to do so. And slowly it takes shape, and nature begins to return. And then life returns in the form of people bringing their houses. And the central area is also used for fishery. This is what it looks like in the islands we call chars, and it's really just a simple village. And this is what life is like in those lived islands. Again, the island is forming. Here you can see a school. We had a school here and a community center, and the rest are houses. So we have made about 22 of them, and 2 broke away. 2 were taken by the river, because the whole island was taken by the river. Not our island, but the whole the sandbank. So 20 still stand, and now we're doing 3 or 4 more. So in the last 20 years. This is during floods. So what happens during a flood? The best thing is for the cattle, because then they can be dry and on high land, and normal activity can continue. And of course, you can see the flood all around, but this is jute plants. And of course, the jute can be dried on the drier land. And the water inside is in the pond is, of course, clean. It's rainwater, so it's clean and can be used for cooking or usual daily activities. So the question is, I was asked this question, whether this is architecture. So for me personally, I think anything that touches human and animal lives is architecture. So maybe it's in between landscape architecture and landform architecture, but it really doesn't matter. This is really, I think, where our work is really needed to understand all these complexities of water and nature and the variables that we cannot measure. This is a project in the middle of the city of Dhaka, which is not a small city in terms of area. It's about 700 square miles, but in terms of population, it's 17 million people. So it's one of the largest cities in the world. But so this area, this competition happened in 1997 because essentially the war for liberation of Bangladesh started essentially from this place, and it also ended in the same grounds in 1971. Historically, this used to be a race course. As such, it was open, it was park-like. And so the competition called for a lot of things, a museum, a monument, etc. Our solution was to really keep the footprint to a minimum. And as you can see, of the 67 acres of land, we have taken very little of it. And so the museum, the winning idea, I guess, was that the museum was really sunk below grade, which means the roof of the museum then became a plaza, a public plaza, which held the story of the long journey onto freedom. And this wall, which sort of guides towards the tower, also carries within it the access ramps. And as one goes towards the tower, one encounters a shallow pool of water, which is like a black hole because the water goes into the central hole. It draws the water into itself. So sort of signify the silent bearing of torture and genocide during those 9-month long wars. Again, the plaza on top, surrounded by the water, the abstract water of the landscape, and below is is this museum, and this is where the water falls in the center. This is what it looks like as you approach. It's all concrete. This is the central pool, which I talked about, the silent bearing of torture and genocide, and one takes then the ramp to go down. You may notice that the concrete here is all marked. It's because for 6 years this project was abandoned. And I was able to convince the authorities to leave the concrete like this because it was flooded. It was not maintained, it was not cleaned, rainwater came in. So it was part of the story of the buildings. We left it like this. You can see that it's, all the marks are there. These are temporary, or let's say not the final exhibits, but even these were broken recently in the recent revolution, or let's say riots. So again, this is the central chamber into which the water falls, and in this central chamber there are no displays. It's just a space for meditation and sort of in the sound of the falling water and the light that comes in through the only source of light in the ceiling, through that oculus, one may remember those fallen known and unknown. One takes the stairs back and the ramp back up to towards the monument itself. Now, the monument is a tower of glass. Now, we didn't choose glass as the material, we chose light. And the only material that could hold light was glass. And glass was not chosen for its properties of reflection or transparency, but we chose it for refraction. And so pieces of glass, 19 mil thick, 75 mil wide, and a meter long. They were stacked one above the other with technical adhesive, which is essentially glass clear silicone. And then these were made to form a panel. And these panels then went onto a vertical space frame, and it rose to a height of 46 meters. It sounds a little technical because it is technical. But we were at the end. I actually came to Paris in 1999 to find a designer, a glass designer for this, and we talked to RFR and some other people. But finally, it was some other agency which did the detailing, and as you can see, we were quite happy with the kind of small details that we sort of came up with. And during the day, the light, of course, refracts, but at night it becomes like a beacon because of the light, sort of the glass catches. And these are photographs by myself, not photoshopped. It just looks like this if you go close or far. And we had these beams shooting up, so from a distance, one can see from anywhere in the city the tower of light, so to speak. So it's not true that we only work in disaster projects, we also work in normal projects. This is the Friendship Center, but this project is also vulnerable to floods, but we protected it through an embankment with very nominal budget. This is a university building, also very porous. There's a lot of porosity to bring in light and green, and of course the materiality of bricks which are in use in Bangladesh for at least 2,300 years. So we have examples of that from the 3rd century BC. At least some new excavations suggest it could be as old as 7th century BC. We have done a set of 5 mosques. I don't know why people just keep coming to us for mosques. And so this is the first one we did in 2007. Well, it was in January 2008, it was inaugurated. Very simple, sort of to bring in light. And so we had to work with, of course, a contemporary sort of language or expression of the mosque. And for me personally, it's just a shelter. I'm more interested in the spirituality of it rather than just the religious rituals. There's another one in Chittagong, which is the port city. It's entirely in concrete. This is also in concrete, but red concrete. And we have preserved a 200-year-old mosque onto which the new one looks. This is a city mosque that you were talking about. Today, about 4,500 people use it. A very small one is like almost like a prayer room in the middle of a village. This is a pavilion apartment where we live. I can talk about climate change because I've lived here since 2000 or 2001, and till 2008, I could live without air conditioning. I could live without even a fan, just nothing, just like in Europe. It was all right. I mean, maybe 8 or 10 days a year, it was a little bit hot, but now it's impossible. So it just tells you the amount of heat and heat island effect that's being generated in cities, and it makes life unbearable in terms of temperatures and humidity sort of accumulation. This is in the Rohingya refugee camps, little schools that we made, again for friendship, on UNICEF funds for UNICEF. We had 3 days to design and 3 weeks to build. And we could only use bamboo. There was a restriction, but we tried to open it up inside to give them a little bit more space, a little bit more sunlight, and of course, a little bit more joy. This is sculpture park and art center that's nearly finished for Samdani Foundation, who are responsible for the Dhaka Art Summit. Arguably, I think one of the most important voices in art in that part of the world. There are many things, so we just scattered the various facilities over the landscape so that the sculpture park could happen in between. For example, this is an art gallery which is in the middle of a paddy field. These are artists' residences. This hospital is again in a remote area in a place called Satkhira, which is, you can see it's near the border with India. And in a rural landscape, in a very poor area. But the first time I went there, I really couldn't understand why people were buying water to drink. Now, you just might have seen there's so much water here, but there's really, literally not a drop to drink. It's amazing. So it's because of the salt in the water. It's salty water, even underground and above ground. Now, mind you, we are 65 kilometers from the Bay of Bengal. We're 65 kilometers inland, and still the water has come in. Water underground is salty, saline, till the depth of 1,200 feet or about 400 meters. It's all salty. It's unusable. The water overland is all salty. No agriculture is possible anymore. Now, I know in this world today there are a lot of people, including some presidents, who think that climate change is not real. All they have to do is go to this place and they can see. They can see for themselves. I'm not making it up or I'm not promoting anything. This is what's happening. So all around the water that you see, this is not agriculture. This is shrimp farming, because this is all that is possible now. The economy was decimated, but they quickly sort of adapted. But of course, they're still quite poor. And in this was introduced this 80-bed hospital, a full-function hospital with a very limited budget. The budget, I have to tell you, is including everything, all that you see, including all the furniture with the power plants, with the water treatment plants, with the STP, with the air conditioning, with the OT, everything was $2 million. And that's all, even we didn't have that. At first, we had about $1 million or something. And then work was stopped in the middle for 6 months. They raised for the firm funds. And then with $2 million, we finished everything. And this is back in 2018 that we completed it. So as you can see, this is the water I'm talking about. This is the water from the sea that's come in. So we of course know that the hospital is really like a machine. It needs to function efficiently with highest efficacy for medical care, as well as to stop any cross contamination and this sort of thing. So our idea was to make it super efficient within the given budget. But then, of course, try to do that extra for the people who are coming for medical care. So we tried to lay everything very systematically in terms of zoning, but then we needed to separate the outpatient department from the inpatient department. And because the plot of land, which is donated, is linear, and to divide it was becoming even more linear, we introduced a canal which is separating, its access control, so you see the other space, but you cannot go. And this water is also harvesting the rain water. Now, we are not harvesting most of the rainwater, we are harvesting all of the rainwater that falls within the areas of the campus. And this channel sort of moves all along the length of the campus to collect the harvest. And as you can see, for example, the water from the roofs fall here, from the plazas, from everywhere. And while we say we collect the rainwater, it also means that we move away the high rainfall that we get in this area more and more. So it's also as a drainage kind of a system. And of course, we used maximum use of light and natural ventilation so that we don't need to use air conditioning, and also minimum use of light, artificial lighting during, especially during daylight hours. So, for example, to catch the maximum amount of breeze, we turned our buildings from this side, and on this side, we sort of fed wind into these areas to the courtyards. But we also took help of the morning sun, the afternoon sun, and of course, reflected light from those courtyards. And this is where the collection is happening, as you can see. So we have large tanks here, an existing pond here, another tank here. So we're collecting, and these are interconnected so that we can collect the spill or extra water in the front so that villagers can come and use it also. So these areas are paved so that we can collect the water. And that's the pond in the front. The corridors are wide enough to prevent solar heat gain as well as to protect from driving rain. So this is the zoning I was talking about. So in this line, for example, this is the residential entry because the plot of land was like this. So this is the residential area, the outpatient department, the hospital, and the services on this side. For the services, we introduced a long service spine, which sort of feeds into each and every function area from the back as well as from the front. And on this side is public, and then more patient areas, and these are OT or operating rooms and restricted areas, and at the back, services. So during COVID-19, this really helped because the corridor was, all our corridors are naturally ventilated and single-loaded, which means there's function on only one side. And this helped during COVID-19 to, in terms of infection, cross-infection, et cetera. So the hospital could really function easily during the pandemic. And of course, the water is used as a kind of a pleasing effect, as well as for microclimatic cooling. So when we turned our buildings, it's not a formal gesture. It's not for architectural reasons. We turned them to catch the wind that I talked about. But then our courtyards were becoming, let's say, differently shaped. And we made sure that standing in any courtyard, you have the references of the rectangle. For example, if one is standing here, this is the shape, and here, this is the other one. So the edges are being, let's say, caught by the different volumes and functions. So then resulted some surprising forms, which of course worked quite well for us. The material is really handmade local bricks to encourage, again, local manufacture, and the wood. All the windows and doors are local mahogany wood. And the floor is just the concrete of the floor, or the slabs are polished. So there's no other treatment as such. We studied this in great detail in our offices, in our office, in our studio, with very large models to try to understand how these spaces were working. So the idea was to create quiet spaces, calming spaces. Now, we realize that once people come to the hospital, they are not looking at the architecture, they're really looking for medical care. But when they enter into this recuperative stage, when they're becoming better, we believe that architectural space has that possibility to be calming, to be caring as well. And that's what we try to do with the light and the natural ventilation and the simplicity and calmness of spaces. So we really try to quieten down our spaces and the mass forms. And some of the things we could not estimate. For example, apparently these courtyards are used by mothers for their newborn babies because they take them out into the sun, they go for a stroll. This we didn't plan. But it happens in the hospital quite a lot. And so I guess nature is something which we don't have to design for it. It just comes naturally. If we do it like this, we get the benefits, the myriad of benefits from sun and the wind. All the spaces overlook a courtyard or open space. So it's really like a kind of a miniature version of the delta that's outside. Inside, there's this kind of a river or canal that's moving. And so in the small budget that I talked about, we tried to create not only just an efficient building, but also spaces which were meaningful and comfortable for some of the poorest of poor in my country. This is the last project. So I talked about floods, which is increasing almost every year because of this climate change. And there are many of us here who have been to Bangladesh, have seen what goes on over there. And the same thing is happening in a different way in the south, which I just talked about, the rising oceans and the water coming in even 65 kilometers inside. The other thing is Bangladesh gets hit by a lot of cyclones, which are really hurricanes, and this super cyclonic storm, as they are called. The shelter that we have is near the Bay of Bengal. It's on the Bay of Bengal. So cyclones, as I said, are big storms which form in the Bay of Bengal due to pressure differences. It's a work of the weather system. and it moves inland many times going into India, especially to Orissa, but unfortunately it lands in Bangladesh most of the time. And the frequency is increasing there used to be a major cyclone every 10 years, every decade, but now it's more. If you just look at the record, you will see how slowly it's increasing, and of course, the intensity of it. This is the cyclone Sidr in 2007, which formed here and slowly was moving towards India, but slowly it turned and came into Bangladesh. And this is an actual satellite image. This is the width of the country, and you can see that the storm is really as wide as the country itself. So it made landfall on the night of November 15th and causing fatalities of more than 10,000 lives. This is documented 10,000. It could be much more still. And of course, so this is how it moved in. And I was in Dhaka and listening to the radio, and my friends who were photographers who were there, they said, we cannot talk about it. If you want to see it, you come and see it. And that's what we thought of doing the next morning. Myself and 3 other people from my office, we went to this place, which is about 250 kilometers from Dhaka, and it took us 13 hours to reach this place because all the bridges were down, it was broken, nothing was working. And from there, we hired a boat, a small country boat, a wooden boat, and we lived in the boat for 4 days and 4 nights. We traced the path of the cyclone. We went to everywhere that the cyclone had sort of passed through, trying really to understand what happens during such a phenomenon. And I work as a photographer, so I took photographs, and we made some audio recordings, not as interviews, but just recording what people were talking about or saying. And if you can believe it, this is a river, and you really don't see the other side. It's because the water had not gone out even then. And here used to be a forest. And of course, most of the houses, which are wooden houses with tin sheds, is no match for the power of the cyclones. I just showed you that the wind speed is 220 kilometers per hour, and at places 260 kilometers per hour was recorded. So if you can imagine it, it's midnight, the power is out, it's totally dark, and the water has moved in because of the tidal surge. The water is moving 7 meters above the ground, and there is this movement of air at 200 plus kilometers per hour, this howling sound, and this thunderstorm, and this lightning. And then people were saying, demons in the sky. So when I first heard this, I thought it was trauma. It was people, it's not making sense. Then somebody again said the same thing, demons in the sky. And then I said, what is it? What are you talking about? He said, fire in the sky. I said, what is this? And then we realized that the wind speed was so much that the wind had actually caught fire. And this happens in the time of cyclones. You see burnt bodies, both animal and human. So all of this happening at the same time. And of course, for example, this girl is looking towards where her house was, and there's not a single piece of evidence of that house, or remnant from that house. And in 2007, she was 5 years old, had lost everyone in her family. My idea of the photograph was not to show the faces. Of course, they're sad, they're in trauma, there's no meaning. So we are standing with them, looking towards where their house used to be. And for example, this boy, again, at first I couldn't understand what he's talking about. So then, from this we could understand this is where he tied himself, and the water was at this level. And we measured it. It was 7 meters. So he tied himself there, and he saved himself. And this man, when we met him, he was not making sense. He had lost everyone in his family, his wife, children, his parents, his brother's family. And he himself buried 8 people. This man was saved by the intelligence of his wife. His wife, ladies back home, they wear a kind of a long cloth called a sari. So it's a very graceful dress, but it's just one piece of cloth that wraps around the body. And the moment she saw the water coming, she said, "Take off your clothes." She took off her sari, he took off his clothes, and then they climbed to the highest branch and tied themselves, the two of them and the little baby. They tied themselves to the branch and they were saved, while all their neighbors were sort of lost. And all that remains from his house are these things. This is all. So there used to be, this forest that you see was here. So this is where the cyclone passed. So you can imagine it was also quite traumatic for us, but we are not an aid agency. And we thought the only thing we can do is, from our first-hand experience, maybe design something which is better, has appropriate technology and better suited to sort of defend people against this high water and wind pressure. And one of the things that we understood was people took time to get to a shelter. Now, a shelter saves people from cyclones. It's called a cyclone shelter. There are already many cyclone shelters in Bangladesh from the government, from the public sector. But sometimes people don't know where they are because they look like ordinary buildings and they lose their way around it. So one of our first ideas was to design something which people distinctly remember as made for cyclones. So that was one of the things. The other thing, of course, we realized that nothing else stands in the path of a cyclone. Masonry structure, steel structure, these don't work. Only concrete, heavy concrete structure. So that's what we designed. So it's a very simple cruciform-shaped plan, and we sought to protect the entire building with a wraparound ramp. This ramp could then protect from high wind and hydraulic pressure. And as you can see, during normal times, it would function as a school, a primary school, and a day clinic. So on the ground floor is this day clinic, and we have these small rooms, which are storerooms for furniture. So in times of a cyclone, the furniture can be moved to those stores, and the entire area can be cleaned up for people to come inside. The same goes for the school with the storerooms. And then one goes to the roof. The ramp leads all the way to the roof. And the other thing we found out was that the windows don't work. Normal windows don't work because everything is flying during a cyclone. All sorts of debris, tins, roofs, doors, everything is flying. So trees, entire trees are flying. So these come and hit the glass, and the glass breaks, and the howling wind comes in. It's traumatic for the people, and they are not protected. So we sort of changed our windows to this little pigeonhole kind of egg crate devices, which are recessed in the concrete, and the glasses are made smaller for higher strength, and these are tempered glasses set in aluminum, powder-coated aluminum. And we provided rainwater harvest and solar panels for this facility to function off the grid. So again, the main building, a cruciform-shaped building with light wells and ventilation wells in the corner, and this ramp sort of protects the entire ensemble. And what happens is, again, the cattle here is a factor, the cows and the goats, just like the first project I showed, because the people bring them with them because they don't want to lose their cows. And then they cannot bring it inside. So our solution was to make sure that the ramp goes all the way to the roof so that the cows and the goats can be on the roof and be saved from the tidal surge that I talked about. So we had a design. In 2007 or 2008, we had a design, but we didn't have the money or the land. We didn't have a project as such to make. And we made a book to raise funds to make a prototype. And we tried to sell this as a kind of a fundraising, and we failed. We failed for 6 years. And then in 2013, there was this exhibition in Dhaka where we had, among other projects, we kept this. And in the client, it said client search. And there was a group visiting from Luxembourg, and they said, what is this client search business? And we said, we're still searching for the clients. And one of them, they said, do you think it's a possibility that we take this exhibition to Luxembourg and try to raise funds there? I said, by all means. So this person, Mark Elvinger, he took this, who made the effort to take the entire exhibition to the Foundation of Architects and Engineers there. And there were some events. This exhibition, my wife, who's a musician, she gave a concert, and we were able to raise funds for one structure, which is 280,000 euros. And work began with all energy back home. The contractor we got, because this is a very remote area, nobody wanted to go there. So we had a local contractor who had never worked with concrete, and they had no clue whatsoever. So we had to train them, and as you can see, very basic ways of doing things, but slowly the building began to rise. The initial concrete work, as you can see, was not good at all. And we struggled quite a lot to try to make them. They couldn't understand why we have to have this surface this way or that way. But slowly it became better. And of course, they are not to blame for the entirety of it, because the ramp, as you can imagine, it's turning as it's going up, which means every formwork is different and everything had to be different. It was complicated for them. It was even complicated for us. But finally, slowly, it started to work. And this is the floor that's just being polished, the concrete floor. There's no other material on the floor. And the first day of school. Again, we didn't realize that the ramp would become a kind of a play element for children. In some classes, this is primary school, so in some classes they are sitting on the ground, on the floor. In some, of course, the higher classes, they have, and this is the waiting area of the clinic. The minimal furniture is again because of that, so that we can move those in terms of a cyclone. The roof. So as you can see, the ramp sort of rotates as it goes up. So this was the idea, to have a marker, kind of a landscape, so that it's easily recognizable. This is an older kind of a chart, but so far, more than 50,000 people have received medical care in the day clinic. And of course, many students have finished their class 5 and moved on to higher schools. But more importantly, perhaps, this has seen or given shelter to people in times of 4 cyclones. So you can see how people, they took shelter, because in this kind of a scenario, if they do not go to the shelter, they will die. It's not an if, it's not a question. They will simply perish. So this is an architecture which stands distinctly and firmly between life and death. So just to finish, if we talk about care, I think it's 2 sides of the same coin: the care for the humankind and the care for the natural world. And after decades of so-called signature architecture or starchitecture, I think we have now come to this point where we realize that architecture is really about responsibility. It's about a critical response in a world which is increasingly becoming fragile, not just ecologically, but also economically, politically. And so I think as architects, we have a lot of responsibility to not just work with information, but also to work with knowledge, which is, of course, much more. And not just our own knowledge, but the world knowledge. And if it's possible to work with the experience of others, I know these look like exotic kind of projects in faraway lands, but I assure you that given our experience of the pandemic especially, we realize that we essentially living in one planet. Although it has a variety, it's really that experience and that wisdom of building that we really need to tap into. Because as I always say, in 120 years, none of us are going to be here. None of us are going to be alive, not even the little baby that's being born today. So I hope that after that 120 years, the generation that will sort of inherit our architecture, whether we like it or not, they will inherit our architecture. And hopefully they will say that we acted responsibly, that we took our work seriously, and that we were sensitive to the fragile ecosystem in which this world is destined to exist. Thank you very much.